Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very inspiring show coming right up with two very special guests. Our first guest today is Candice Rosen, and she's here to talk with us about her new book, Forget Dieting. It's all about data-driven fueling. So have you tried every diet out there, but just nothing seems to work? So Candice is here to share with us a new way of looking at dieting. Now, as a registered nurse with a master's degree in social work and a certification in health counseling from the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, Candice has spent her life's work focusing on improving the wellness of both her clients and community. She believes the body has the ability to heal itself from most diseases if given the tools, proper nutrition, effective stress management techniques, and consistent low-impact exercise. So let's welcome to the show, Candice Rosen.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be with you today and to talk about my favorite subject, forget dieting.
Well, yeah, what an honor it is to have you here to talk about this. And I have to ask you, my goodness, what started you on this path? Because I think a lot of times people really get so confused when we talk about dieting.
It's true. Yeah, I once read that there were 17,000 diets out there worldwide. And I don't know if that's true, but on any given day, 1 in 3 women are dieting and 1 in 4 men are dieting, which pretty much illustrates that diets don't work. And so the program that I developed, originally the pancreatic nutritional program that morphed into the data-driven diet program, which is all about precision nutrition, is really focusing on a lifestyle. So this is not about a diet to lose 20 pounds or 30 pounds. This is a lifestyle. And it all began a little over 14 years ago when I was asked to develop a diet program plan for women with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so my research led to the fact that women that have PCOS, and PCOS is where you have irregular periods. Girls will get cystic acne, they'll get some facial hair on the arms, they gain weight, and it's related to insulin resistance. And many of them go on to develop type 2 diabetes. Well, what is the truth about PCOS is that when you raise your blood sugar and your pancreas pumps out a ton of insulin, it never meets up perfectly. So you have excess insulin floating through your body, through your bloodstream, and that's called hyperinsulinemia. And what that does is excess insulin suppresses the production of estrogen, and then these women will get a rise in testosterone, the androgens, and that's where they get the facial hair and the hair on the arms and the whole bit. So by controlling your blood sugar and being very vigilant about it, you reduce and reverse the symptoms of PCOS. And then I was applying that then to other non-communicable diseases, and it just worked. So.
My goodness, how impressive is that? And you do hear, women suffering from all sorts of ailments when it comes to weight gain. They say, and a lot of times they're like, you're premenopausal or menopausal, and it's just what's happening. So you have to deal with it.
Right. And that's not true. As Dr. Mark Hyman says, and many others, food is medicine, and it truly is. And, I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for over 44 years. I'm also a social worker and a nutritionist. And so behavior modification is a big thing. I had a professor that once said it's easier to get someone to change their religion than their diet. And we were all laughing in class. We thought that was the craziest thing. But you know what? It's true, okay? Because, there's cultural issues. There's all sorts of, depressive eating, a number of things. So you self-soothe with food. But I feel that once you understand your body, your organic machine, and you figure out what it can and cannot handle, there's no need to diet. I can give you a story about myself. 2 years after I developed this program for PCOS patients, I had a cancer scare. They thought I had ovarian cancer, and by the grace of God, I had a total hysterectomy and did not have ovarian cancer. I had a very bizarre tumor that had wrapped itself around my descending artery and my ureter on the right side. And so I worked in the OR. Abdominal hysterectomy, soup to nuts, is usually 90 minutes. And this was a 4.5-hour abdominal surgical procedure, which left me afterwards very weak. And I just didn't feel like myself, and had, lots of hot flashes. And by the way, I was 36 pounds heavier. And I'd been on every diet known to man throughout my life. A wedding, a reunion, special occasion, whatever, I would work out like a fiend, starve myself, and then lose the weight, and then afterwards gain back the 20 pounds and then some. So, I'd been on liquid protein, I'd been on Atkins, cabbage soup diet, and the whole bit. Well, after the surgery and all, my physicians decided that they wanted to put me on 5 medications. One, Boniva for bone density, hormone replacement therapy, statin drug because I didn't have the protective effects of my ovaries, so my cholesterol was increasing. I don't remember what the 4th drug was, but the 5th drug was Effexor, which is an antidepressant. And I sat there like in shock, and I said there was a group of physicians, and I said, I went under the knife. I went into the operating room thinking that when I came out, I would be dealing with chemotherapy or radiation, and was so fortunate that it was a benign tumor. So I'm just not walking on the sunny side of the street. I'm dancing on the sunny side of the street. I'm not depressed. And they said, well, it will work in conjunction with the hormone replacement therapy. And I said, you know what? I don't want to go on anything. I'd like to try this program that I developed for polycystic ovarian syndrome patients and see where that leads me. And I'll be back in 3 to 4 months. Well, during that time, I lost the 36 pounds. I've never put it back on because I know exactly what fuel works for my body and what doesn't. And I'm 66 years old and I'm not on any medication at all, even though I have a family history of diabetes, obesity, and heart disease.
So, Candice, can you hear that right now? I can hear all sorts of things going on. It sounds like a stampede of women and men to get this book. Because, I got to tell you, you get to a certain age and people just are constantly saying, hey, you've got to take all these pills, and it's not short term. These things can be lifetime, as far as some of the medications they talk about, and some of them can have some very adverse effects as well. So being able to manage, your self and your personal health and your weight and everything I found through your book was so powerful. And I'm sure you're getting the same response from people that are using this as well.
Yes. Yeah, I have. It's unfortunately, I've seen over the years that medical schools are turning out physicians that aren't looking at the root cause of problems, but they've become nothing more than pharmaceutical bartenders. And the American public has been overserved for far too long. So this is what I believe. I believe in the practice of self-health, that you are your primary caregiver and your physician is your secondary caregiver. My hypothesis is that all non-communicable diseases stem from pancreatic abuse. So those non-communicable diseases would be high blood pressure, high cholesterol, obesity, type 2 diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, low testosterone, insulin resistance, renal issues, and even some cancers. So how do I define pancreatic abuse? Anytime you raise your blood sugar over 190 minutes after you eat a meal or a snack, you are asking for trouble. You're asking for inflammation. You're asking for poor health. And so what I ask my clients to do is to test their blood glucose as a diabetic would for 3 to 4 months, 90 minutes after eating a meal or a snack, so they can either say, okay, that works or that doesn't. And your body talks to you. Your body will talk to you when you get on a scale and you see the numbers, when you take your clothes off and look at a mirror and assess your body, and when you test your blood glucose. And with data-driven fueling, I've also added for some of those clients of mine that are squeamish about sticking their finger to tune in. So they set their timer on their phone for 90 minutes after they eat a meal. And you assess, you listen to your body. Are you ravenous? Are you sleepy? Those would be signs of eating the wrong foods. If you feel great after 90 minutes and all you need is like, oh, I'd like a glass of water or maybe some hot tea or unsweetened iced tea or whatever, then you know what you ate was good for you and your body. And that would be the proper fuel for your organic machine. And a lot of people don't understand that your body is hardwired to heal itself. It wants to survive, but you have to give it tools to work with. And that would be wholesome, nutritious, responsibly grown, pancreatic-friendly foods.
So, how do hormones play a part in all this? Because I know you mentioned estrogen earlier dropping and how that affect things. But, when we look at hormone and stress, how does that affect everything?
Well, the one thing I'll interject when we're talking about hormones, for example, women who undergo hysterectomy or they're postmenopausal, their rate of heart disease increases because they're not having the protective effects of estrogen from the ovaries. But you can get that from eating tofu, having some edamame, things like that. But hormones like cortisol, adrenaline can affect your weight and your health. So, as an example, and I've written about it in my book, I had a client that I told that stress will increase your blood glucose. And you could be eating perfectly and your blood glucose is great, and a stressful event happens and it will jack your blood glucose. Why? Because you go into that fight or flight mode, which is from, our body was hardwired for centuries ago. So you're not fleeing a tiger or whatever, or a dinosaur, but you're stuck in traffic, or your kid upset you, or you had problems at work or whatever, and that adrenaline and cortisol kicks in. And what it does is it releases, because of that fight or flight, will release glucose from your liver and from your muscles, because you need that extra energy to take off, to run or to fight. But if you're sitting at your desk or you're on a plane or whatever, and you're not using up that glucose, what happens is it gets stored in the fat cells. And then what happens is your pancreas, because that glucose was dumped into your blood system, your pancreas pumps out a ton of insulin, which leads then to hyperinsulinemia, excess insulin throughout your body, and it is highly toxic. So it is so important about managing stress. And I even say to my clients, exercise can produce that same effect. You could be at a yoga class and looking at somebody next to you and saying, oh my God, they're doing down dog better than I am. You stress, you get yourself worked up, or you don't want to be in that exercise class, or you don't want, and you get a dump of cortisol and adrenaline, and you start this vicious cycle. And so you're actually having a counter effect on weight loss.
Wow. That is just so impressive how that all comes together and how you break it all down. You talked about behavior modification being a really difficult thing. What are ways that people can start making small adjustments to a healthier life? I really liked how you talked about like managing, where their levels are of blood sugar after a meal. And that's I think part of the start of being able to take responsibility. But what other things can people do?
Well, my number one mantra is, and your listeners should write it on a piece of paper, type it up, put it on the mirror in their bathroom, put it on outside the refrigerator door. And the mantra is this: your mouth is not supposed to have a party at every meal. So
That's probably new.
So yeah. So it's not supposed to have a party at every meal. You eat to sustain your organic machine, and you get 2 days out of the month for wild days, and that's all in the book with a whole calendar printed out. So it's very easy. You do simple things like make Wednesday and Friday vegan days. Your organic machine will benefit from it. You'll reduce animal suffering and definitely have a positive impact on our environment. Eliminating anything white bread, white rice, white pasta. Another thing is about practicing proper food combining. That's nothing new. That was first started in 1924 and then took off in 1951. So you don't want to, here's a simple example. You would never combine an animal protein with a starch. So you're not going to have chicken and rice. You're not going to have a steak and a baked potato. That's alkaline, acidic. It's mixing up all sorts of stuff. You would never have, if you're going to have pasta, it's going to be a brown rice pasta, and it's going to be with a vegetarian sauce, a marinara, an eggplant sauce. You're not going to have a meat bolognese. So an easy dinner would be fish with some broccoli or asparagus and a nice salad. Can you have wine? Yes, you can have a glass of wine, or you can have, if you want, vodka and soda or whatever. I'd stay away from sweet drinks like margaritas and that. But if you have, if you're on a Saturday night and you want to have that second glass of wine, you have to first, after the first glass, you have to have a full glass of water or a full glass of unsweetened iced tea, because it cuts down on that sugar before you have the second cocktail.
Well, I think those are just important rules to live by anyway, but for something to make such dramatic changes in your health, I mean, who wouldn't do that? What do you feel about coffee? Because I'm sure there are people going, okay, well, I can do this, but I don't know if I can give up my morning coffee.
Oh, they can have coffee. You can have coffee. You can have decaf coffee. Don't forget that if you're getting too much of a buzz with the regular coffee, the high octane, that is going to get you into that fight-flight mode. It's going to, increase your heart rate and the whole bit, and then you can have a dump of glucose from your liver and your muscles. So if when I say to my clients and they'll tell me they go to Starbucks and they get those coffee drinks, macchiato, whatever, I say to them, you don't like coffee. What do you mean? You like milk and you like caramel, whatever, but you don't like coffee because you're not really drinking coffee. So if you want your coffee, you can have that in the morning. You can have, I don't say, even though I encourage eliminating dairy out of your diet, you can still have a little bit of half and half, or switch to a soy creamer or a coconut creamer. Part of the other foundation for the Pancreatic Nutritional Program and data-driven fueling is to eliminate or significantly reduce your consumption of dairy. It's unhealthy for you. Dairy has IGF-1, which is the insulin growth factor. That's not good as far as cancer. Also, what happens is dairy products, yogurt and all, are acidic, gets into your gut, Your gut has to buffer it. Where does it get the buffering agent? It extracts calcium from your bones because calcium is a buffering agent. So it doesn't make sense. You're not getting the calcium you think you are. And why in the U.S. do we have the highest rate of bone fractures and osteoporosis? Because we're eating tons of cheese and yogurt and all. And you can get calcium from kale, dark leafy greens. There are other ways of getting that and strengthening your bones from being active.
So, how important is it that we work out on a daily basis or do steps? How does that play into all this?
Well, you know what? I don't really believe in vigorous workouts. There's so many clients that I work with that because of uh, their excess weight, they're compromised by their knees and whatever. And there are other people that have other health issues that they really can't do that. I love simple things like those of us that are older and remember what it was like to hula hoop. I hula hoop. And so I'll put on a song or two and hula hoop to that. I hike. I'll play tennis. I'll swim. I don't want to look at it as something that I have to do. And I'm active around the house, gardening, housework, whatever. All of that takes fuel to do all those activities. So I break it down like this. What is weight gain? Weight gain is nothing more than taking in the wrong fuel for your body and your body saying, hey, you know what? I can use about 10% of that. And the other 90%, I'm going to have to store it. And what is weight loss? Weight loss is taking in the right fuel for your organic machine, and then you do a little something more. You wash your car, you garden, you wash the floor, you take a walk after dinner around the block a couple of times. So what happens is that your body then has to go into the storage tanks, your tummy, your thighs, anywhere where your fat cells are, and has to extract that energy in order to fuel the body. And that's how you're losing weight.
I know it's been discussed during this COVID period that people are talking about COVID-15 gaining an extra 15 pounds because they've gotten into the habit of eating and maybe lounging around. Exercises can be done in their house, like you mentioned. I mean, you can clean the floors,
Right. Even if you're, here's an example I'll tell my clients. If you're washing clothes, when you're taking things out of the dryer, I like them to take it out one at a time, one sock at a time, and do deep knee bends then. Bend down, deep knee bend, take a sock out, put it out, take the undershirt out, whatever. If you have 20 items in that dryer, you've done 20 squats. You know what I mean? And there you go. But I think that, when you bring up COVID, I think COVID is a wake-up call for all of us. The majority of COVID deaths are due to pre-existing conditions, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and high blood pressure. There are those few cases that you read about that are really unusual with some young person that had a clot or whatever, and I would have to look at their history to really understand that. But and then COVID hit the elderly. Well, why did it hit the elderly? Because they're not at risk just because of their age. They too are suffering from pre-existing conditions, type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, and many of them from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, because if you're dealing with an 80-year-old, many of them were smokers. So whether it's COVID-19 or it's another virus down the pike, you have to have your organic machine in the best condition possible. Okay? Because that way it's able to deal with anything thrown at it. So the first line of defense is a healthy body free from pre-existing conditions.
Well, that's really interesting. And, all the more reason to be as healthy as possible and to, we only have one body, so let's take care of it as best we can.
Right. It's true. And And then the other thing is that you're not tied, you don't have an umbilical cord tied to your local pharmacy. So,
Oh, that's so important.
yeah. And the thing is, if you can change your health just by changing what you eat, that's really not a big deal, because there's so many things in life that we cannot change, that we're powerless about. But I really feel it's an opportunity to have a nonviolent protest, that you, by choosing being careful about what you're purchasing at the store, being careful about how you cook that food and what you eat, less is more, you are sending a message to pharmaceutical companies that you can take care of yourself. You're not going to be dependent on a medication. It frees up your physician to do what he or she really should be doing, which is addressing the root cause and helping you heal yourself, not mask your symptoms with medication.
Yeah, what an empowering place that would be coming from. And also you look at the economic costs and just the cost on our bodies for taking medications like these. It's, I think, much better to get a hold of your health. Candice, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your book and be part of your community?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Candice Rosen RN, and I have a website, www.candicerosenrn.com. The book, Forget Dieting, and the book, my previous book, The Pancreatic Oath, are available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Booktopia and a bunch of others. Yeah. And if anybody has questions, they can reach out to me via the website, and I answer most questions that whatever readers or whatever have for me.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people reach out to you for help because, I mean, my goodness, your book is providing just that for so many people. Candice, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you. And again, like I said, it's an honor, and I really appreciate your interest in my program and the book.
Well, thank you, Candice. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Forget Dieting. It's all about data-driven fueling. Forget Dieting's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers, and if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. And of course, it's available on Kindle. Again, if you like to connect with Candice, you can at CandiceRosenRN.com for more information. So you'll want to stay tuned for our next special guest, Rosemary Keevil, who's here to talk with us about her new book, The Art of Losing It. On that note, we're going to pause here for a quick break. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne. We'll be right back after these messages.
Internationally recognized and award-winning author Judy Goodman works and teaches outside the box of limited thinking. Working with people from every walk of life, her goal is to empower you to be the best you can be, no matter what the challenge is. Born with the gift of seeing beyond our normal vision, she has an extraordinary gift of working with every challenge. Teaching beyond conventional wisdom, her work is described as life-changing. Visit judygoodman.com. That's judygoodman.com.
There comes a moment when you realize you're somewhere special, When you discover that each beautiful creature that you see has been rescued from a life of absolute horror and brought to this incredibly free place, here's where their lives were forever changed and where yours will as well. Discover over 500 tigers, bears, and lions at the brand new visitor center at the Wild Animal Sanctuary just outside Denver. For more information, visit wildanimalsanctuary.org. Discover true freedom at the Wild Animal Sanctuary.
Have you ever had the sense that your thoughts might actually be doing something? Ancient secrets of manifesting have been masterfully revealed in the award-winning book Manifesting 123 by Ken Elliott. For the first time, the author's experiences and stories in this book describe exactly how your thoughts can create anything. You've been doing this all your life, but it's never been fully explained for you until now. Visit manifesting123.com for more information today. Manifesting123.com.
Welcome back to Moments with Marianne. We're here today with our next special guest, Rosemary Keevil, who's here to share with us her new book, The Art of Losing It, a memoir on grief and addiction. Now, Rosemary has been a TV news reporter, a current affairs radio show host, and a managing editor of a professional women's magazine. She has a master's degree in journalism, a sophisticated knowledge of alcoholism, addiction, and associated treatments and therapies, and 2 grown daughters with successful careers. So let's welcome to the show, Rosemary Keevil.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. You know, I have to ask you, what inspired you to decide that now's the time to release this book?
Well, it was just a matter of this is when it was done. It's had different reincarnations over the years, but this is finally the memoir was complete, and it was just time to launch it. It just so happens that it's been launched in 2020.
Well, I think for a lot of people, they're really resonating with your book because there's so much that's happening now that people are going, gosh, I'm going through, I'm losing loved ones. I'm going through really challenging times. And I think your book provides a ray of hope for people who otherwise are thinking, I'm in this alone.
Well, it is a difficult year. And yes, we are losing loved ones, although it's losing a loved one is sort of universal. It can happen anytime. And it's also a time when mental health is sort of challenged, and addiction falls under the umbrella of mental health. And with us being so isolated and cooped up, if you have any tendency towards any type of addiction, it could actually be triggered under the circumstances. So I'm hoping that book will be a resource under any times or conditions, and maybe it's even more so now with the strange kind of year that we're having.
To say the least. I know people are experiencing such difficult challenges, and loss on top of that can seem sometimes overwhelming. And I know in your book you share about the loss of your brother and go into that a little bit. I mean, when you look back, how do you think you were able to process that?
Well, I wasn't. My husband got diagnosed with cancer, and my brother got diagnosed with AIDS. This was 1991. I was 36 years old, and they were 41 years old, both of them. And AIDS in those days was a death sentence. And the children were 3, well, they were 2 and 4 when the diagnosis happened, and they were both, they died within about a year or so, both of them. So I was overwhelmed with grief and stress with 2 little girls, and I was working, so there was no processing happening. and, then, and then I fell into the grips of alcohol and drugs 6 years later. And then for 6 years, I was what you'd call a high functioning alcoholic, although it does seem a strange term when you think of some of the bad parenting I did during that time. But the point was, high functioning alcoholics are able to continue working. And then I went into recovery in 2002, and I've been clean and sober since May 3rd, 2002. But that wasn't until that is when I started processing, when I started going through all the wreckage of my past, and was suggested that I had suffered post-traumatic stress syndrome during the crisis time that I was going through in 1991, and that it was time to process all sorts of things, not the least of it, which was the grief. So processing had to wait, and grief is a process. I mean, it's never really over.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think when people go through grief, it can seem like you're just walking in a dark tunnel for a period of time and seem very hopeless. So it's, you often hear about people who are going through just traumatic experiences and grief, or having, also addiction issues, and just, not really being able to work through their process, and come out the other side as easily. I mean, it's different for everybody, but it seems like a lot of people, we go to some pretty dark places with that.
Yes, I think unprocessed grief can lead to chronic conditions, anxiety, depression, addiction, and it is something that needs to be given time. And I think our society isn't necessarily that good at addressing grief, our own or others. And what's really important is that we address the fact that we are grieving, that it's a process, that it's exhausting. Self-care is important. Time is very important. We can't be anxious and let's get this done in a hurry, because it won't get done in a hurry. In fact, losing a loved one leaves a hole in the soul, and the hole never really closes. The edges of the hole can get a bit smoother and softer, but it will never close. There will always be a hole in the soul. So it's a process that cannot be rushed. So I think we need to really respect that and give grief its time. Give us time to grieve, and to, I like to say, the only way past it is through it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I know when my father passed, like 2 weeks later, people are asking me, well, aren't you over it yet? It's kind of like, wait a minute. It's a process. It's not something that you just are expecting to get over. It really is something you walk constantly through.
Well, that's what I mean by our society. People just don't know how to grieve or how to respond to someone who is grieving. When I was going through this and my husband and brother died, my neighbor, who I ran into in the street, started telling me about her dog who had died. And I felt badly for this neighbor, because obviously she was ill-equipped to know how to deal with me, who was probably looking like this dark cloud, because people just don't know how to approach someone who's lost two loved ones within 6 months of each other. We're ill-equipped for this. So, as I said, I actually felt badly for this person, and I was the one that was going through the grieving.
Well, that just shows the level of compassion that you have, that you're able to see that someone else is going through their own challenges, whatever level of grief that is for them. And, grief is grief. There's no, mine is better than yours. And I think that just shares a lot about who you are as a person and your heart. So thank you for sharing that with us. And I wanted to congratulate you on your sobriety because I know, when we talk about addictions, this is a tough journey for a lot of people. At what point in your addiction did you realize I've hit rock bottom? I need to make changes?
Oh, well, as I said, I was self-destructing for 6 years, and I crossed many lines in the sand. And I would drive the kids drunk and high, and I would and I'd drive their friends drunk and high, and many things that I was really incredibly ashamed of and still guilty for. But one night I had a combination of driving them drunk and high and blacking out. I did not have a car accident, but this ended up being a gift. This was my gift of desperation. And I went and saw a friend of mine saw a spiritual counselor. And I thought, well, I wonder if that would help me. I didn't really know what a spiritual counselor was, but I thought maybe it couldn't hurt. So I went and I told the spiritual counselor, I was drunk and high, and I blacked out, and I drove the kids, and I reached rock bottom. I have to do something. And I said to her, do you think I need a spiritual retreat? And she looked at me with her luminous blue eyes, which were kind and probing at the same time. And she said, Rosemary, what about rehab? It was kind of like, that's a bit of a no-brainer, right? Well, here I was looking for a spiritual retreat, and really what I needed was rehab. So the gig was up, and the spiritual counselor had it right on. The spiritual retreat's not going to do a lot of good for this chick. So within a couple of weeks, I booked myself into rehab, but it was tough to swallow. But as I said, I had this gift of desperation, and I just needed a kick in the pants from the spiritual counselor to get me into that rehab. And the 28 days for me, it worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody. It's stuck, and it's one day at a time still, and I'm a work in progress. But so I when you asked when I realized all along that I had a problem, I had to do something about it. But it wasn't until I blacked out at the wheel that I finally had my gift of desperation, and but for the grace of God go I, right?
Well, I'm so glad that you shared that with us, and for our listeners that are, maybe finding themselves in similar situations, there is that ray of hope if you're willing to do things such as check yourself into rehab and start that first step on your new journey.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I hope that the book will be a resource in that respect, that it can give some hope, and I'm living proof that you can live through the grief and the addiction and be okay. Like, I'm okay today, and I once was not okay. So I hope I can represent that.
I think you do that just beautifully. You're a living representation of what life can look like on the other side of this. And, a lot of type A personalities, people who are go-getters and get out there and they're working hard, and you couple that with, things happening in life, challenges, loss, you name it. A lot of people find themselves in very similar situations. And sometimes it's really hard to look at that and say, gosh, maybe I have an addiction problem. And what a blessing that spiritual teacher was, because, sometimes we can't see the forest from the trees, right?
No, exactly.
So I know you help a lot of people today outside of your book with understanding just the path of addiction and overcoming it. Are you seeing some similar patterns when people connect with you about their story that there's been some great loss that's happened as well?
Well, people fall into an addiction for various reasons. But what I think is universal is what we do about it. And again, like with grief, the only way past it is through it. So with addiction, no matter how we got there, we need to figure out why we're there. We need to figure out why we're numbing our emotions. We need to figure out, we need to dig into the wreckage of the past. We need to understand the defects of character which are causing this to happen and work through them. We need to dig through all the dysfunctional coping mechanisms and clear out a lot of the detritus and make some room in that emotional mess for some grace. And that doesn't mean that everything's going to go away all of a sudden, but if we work on the issues that got us here and we make amends to people we've harmed, my biggest amends was to my children, and it was a living amends. We had to start living as a sober mom. So it's a matter of clearing up the wreckage of the past and trying to do the next right thing. And this is what I mean by the only way past it is through it. No matter how we got here, we have to get through it, and we can't just jump to, we just can't just jump to the end. It's like the grief. It takes time, it's a process, and we have to do the work. And work with sobriety, like work with grief and work with getting clean. It's exhausting. It takes time. It needs to be done. It can't be rushed. And professional therapy also helps, all of the above.
I think that that's so empowering because, for people that may be suffering from depression or find themselves overindulging in alcohol, or maybe they're using drugs, there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's work. Everything is work, but it's the work that will get you to where you want to be. And, it has me thinking, my goodness, as a single mom, raising, your children, going through this, what advice, looking back, do you have for single moms or single parents that are raising kids and helping their kids also, go through the grief?
Well, I didn't do a very good job of it.
Well, we all have our journey. But it's like when we have this, we look back, we've got like this 2020 vision of, these things may have worked better if I had done this, or today I know better because now I'm doing X to get to a certain place. Well,
I was just living on grief and stress and indulging in alcohol and drugs to the point. At one point, I finally went over the edge and became a full-blown alcoholic and addict. So I'm a good example of what not to do. I did, in terms of grieving for the children, if someone is a single parent because of a loss of a loved one, one thing I did for me and the children was I did a lot of research. I was at a bookstore and I was buying a lot of books on death and grieving, and the checkout woman said to me, "Do you work in the palliative care unit?"
Aww.
And what I learned was, with the children in particular, to help them through, it's important that anyone who's spending time with them, like caregivers and family members and teachers, understand what's happened and understand that the kids need to be encouraged to talk and maybe work on art. They need an outlet for their emotions, which are very confusing for them. They need to be able to talk about the loved one and not go into normal activities too quickly. And different ages will process finality at different levels, different developmental levels. For example, the 3-year-old, they have a hard time understanding finality. And having said that, she would tell complete strangers that her father had died. And I remember standing by the beans in the grocery store, and there was a woman beside us, a complete stranger, and little Dixie looks up at her and says, "It's my birthday and my daddy's dead, dead, dead." So then I felt badly for this woman, but at the same time, the 5-year-old, she said to me one day, "Who do I tell that daddy has died?" So there's sort of the difference. And I think also someone who's going through grief and a single parent, it's important to understand the 5 stages of grief that we all go through. And the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is the grandma, the guru of grief. And the 5 stages are denial and anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So no matter what our circumstances, grieving, single parenthood, addiction, to me, acceptance is huge. We have to stop fighting it. We have to accept what's going on, and we have to try to do the next right thing. And that was a big lesson for me. Just, okay, accept this. Now what is what's important? This has happened. Now what? For the addiction, this has happened. I'm guilty of being a bad mother. I'm full of shame and remorse. Now what? So once I accept that, acceptance provides a certain amount of freedom in a strange way. It doesn't let me off the hook, but it lets me be able to put that there, accept that, and move forward. It's hard to move forward without acceptance. If we're fighting it all the way, we need to accept it, and we need to only pass it is through it.
Well, I think that's such wise advice to give anybody, and I think our listeners really appreciate hearing that, because a lot of times I think there's just so many misnomers when it comes to grief and processing. And, if you are to look back to yourself when this first happened and knowing all the things that you know now and everything that you've gone through, what would you share with yourself, your younger self now?
Oh.
I'm sure a whole lot, right?
Good luck, baby.
Hold on, right?
Yeah, hold on.
Oh.
Well, I think ultimately there's not a profound message I could have given myself. There really isn't. I mean, it was tough. It was really, 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 really hard. And the only way past it is through it. And the only reassuring message is that you're going to be okay. You actually are going to be okay. But it's going to be, I remember once when I was going through the dying of both the men in my life. And I remember saying to my mother, I just wish it were 5 years from now and all of this is over. Well, little did I know, 5 years from now, things were just as tough. I was just as sad. I was about to launch on my 6 years of self-destruction of drugs and alcohol. When I said, I just wish it were 5 years from now, I guess the message would be, it's going to be okay. Maybe not tomorrow, but I am going to be okay. And I am one of the lucky ones. People can get stuck in chronic addiction, chronic depression, and chronic anxiety, and people can get stuck in addiction. People can die from addiction and alcoholism. So I am a lucky one. I'm okay. So my message to myself would have been, it's going to be okay.
I think that's a great message. That you're going to get through this, Eventually it's going to be okay. But just like everything else, it's a journey. And, it's interesting. I've heard people say before that, when they've gone through really challenging and difficult times, they question whether or not they would ever change that experience. And some say yes. And some say, I probably wouldn't because it's made me the person I am today. How do you feel about that?
Well, on the one hand, I feel, oh heavens, I wish this had never happened, because it's been difficult. It's been very, very difficult. If ultimately my journey, which has resulted in this book, has helped people and can be a beacon of hope for people going through similar issues, then that is worth it. That makes it worthwhile. And so far, the response to the book has been very positive, and it seems to be touching a chord in people. It seems to bring out a certain tenderness in them. It's interesting. So if I can end up being a resource and a beacon of hope, then it all has been worthwhile.
I think your story helps a lot of people who have had life challenges or maybe going through a life challenge today. As we're isolated and, the world's changing, but at the same time, a lot of people are still isolating. We're still concerned about how tomorrow's going to look, and to be able to go, you know what, I'm going to get through this. It's going to be okay. I think your book really helps give people a sense of peace that, no matter how bad it gets, you're going to be okay.
Right. You're going to be okay. That's the best I can promise. But sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you're not sure you're going to be okay. You have to get through the thick of it. My big message is the only way past it is through it. And we need to accept that. Acceptance comes before the journey.
Were there times where you just wanted to give in through, your sobriety and just say, screw it, I'm tired. This is a lot of work. I have to work through my emotions and my feelings. I'm just going to go back.
Well, it's sort of twofold. One is, I'm one of the fortunate ones. My obsession to drink and use was lifted. So I never really had cravings again. There have been occasions where it's kind of like, oh man, I wish I had the option to just numb myself tonight because this is overwhelming. But I mean, I quickly play with the tape and that's not going to happen. But again, I'm a fortunate one, and my obsession was lifted, and I've never been seriously tempted to go down that road. And I'm very, very fortunate with that. I mean, I can fantasize, but I know I don't have the option. Other people might have the option to numb themselves tonight. I don't have that option. And I'm fully aware of that. So that's not even tempting.
Well, I can understand why. And, it has me thinking, I have a question about your book. I mean, all the chapters are titles of songs. How has music impacted your journey? Why did you include that in this book?
Well, many of us have certain songs that we associate with certain times in our lives. And this is just something that occurred to me, and I don't know why, that I would just title the songs, but there were certain things that happened during times that were really specific. For example, the last healthy date that my husband and I had was at a Paul Simon concert. So one of the titles of the chapters is a Paul Simon song. And then there was the album Van Morrison's Avalon Sunset, and there was many songs in that were just relevant to what my husband was going through. I'd love to write another song, for example, and he couldn't write songs. He was a musician or play his guitar because he had numbness in his fingers because his cancer was in his brain as well as his lymphatic system. And I played some Van Morrison at his service. So there was just periods in our lives that we associate with certain songs, and I couldn't get that out of my head. Interestingly enough, my daughters, who are in their early 30s now, one is very, very, very private, and I respect that. The other one's writing her own addiction memoir because she went through an addiction herself, and she has a New York agent interested, but she, independently of me, also titled her chapters with songs. I find that very interesting.
It sounds like music was a touching point of certain memories for your family. So good, bad, whatever was going on, there were songs that kind of brought you to that memory.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Really, ultimately, there are three things. And I'll just sum up what I've been saying. Acceptance. We need to accept where we're at. When you accept what has happened, in order to move forward, we can't do that without acceptance. The only way past it is through it. There's no way around it. There's no fast forward. And you're going to be okay. You are going to be okay. So those are my messages. Those are my takeaways.
Rosemary, where can our listeners connect with you and learn about your book, The Art of Losing It, and be part of your community?
Well, I have a website. It's rosemarykeevil.com. That's Keevil, rosemarykeevil.com. And that can be a resource and a way to get a hold of me if anybody has further questions or needs a bit of encouragement. I can gladly be there for that.
Well, Rosemary, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you. It's been very enjoyable.
Well, thank you, Rosemary. We appreciate your time today and sharing your book, The Art of Losing It. The Art of Losing It is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, ask for them to order it. Again, if you'd like to connect with Rosemary, you can at rosemarykeevil.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.